The stagecoach door swung open, and Ronan Hale saw his future step into the dust, crying. Not nervous tears, not the careful kind women hide behind handkerchiefs at weddings. Real crying, the kind that came from somewhere deep and broken. He'd paid for a mail-order bride, sure, but he hadn't expected this. A young woman with red eyes and a trunk that looked like it had been packed in a hurry, clutching a letter so crumpled it might have been read 100 times. She looked at him like she was waiting to be turned away. And here's the thing, he almost did. If you want to see how a broken woman and a lonely rancher built something real out of nothing but grit and second chances, stick around till the end. And hey, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Ronan Hale wasn't a man who believed in fate, luck, or divine intervention. He believed in land, cattle, and the kind of work that left your hands too rough to hold anything delicate. He'd built his ranch in the Wyoming frontier with his own sweat, his own money, and his own silence. No partners, no family, no distractions. Just 500 acres of grass, a modest herd, and a house that echoed when he walked through it at night. So when he'd written to the matrimonial agency back in Boston, it wasn't romance he was chasing, it was practicality. A man his age, 34, weathered, with a limp from a bad fall 3 winters back, couldn't work a ranch alone forever. He needed help, a wife. Someone who could cook, mend, maybe keep the books. Someone who understood that frontier life didn't come with softness or second tries. The agency had sent him a letter 2 months ago. Her name was Margaret Ann Cavanaugh, 23 years old, educated, from a respectable family in Philadelphia. The photograph they'd included showed a serious-looking woman with dark hair pulled back tight, her expression unreadable. Ronan had studied that picture for a long time, trying to figure out if she looked strong enough for what was coming. He couldn't tell, but he'd signed the papers anyway. Now, standing outside the stagecoach station in the small town of Cartwell, population maybe 200 on a good day, he wondered if he'd made a mistake. The stage was late, 40 minutes late. Ronan leaned against the hitching post, his hat pulled low, watching the road. A few townspeople milled around, storekeepers, a couple of ranch hands, old Mrs. Pritchard who ran the boarding house and had opinions about everything. She'd already given Ronan a look when she saw him waiting. He ignored her. When the stagecoach finally rattled into view, dust trailing behind it like a dirty ghost, Ronan straightened. His chest felt tight. Not nervousness exactly, more like the feeling you get before a storm hits and you're not sure if your roof's going to hold. The driver pulled the horses to a stop, swearing at them in a voice that carried across the street. The door opened, and she stepped out. Ronan's first thought was that the agency had sent the wrong woman. She was younger than the photograph suggested. Thinner, too. Her dress was dark blue, travel-stained, and her hair, brown, not quite dark enough to be black, had come loose from its pins. But it was her face that stopped him cold. She'd been crying, hard. Her eyes were red and swollen, her cheeks blotched, and she held herself like someone who'd just survived something terrible and wasn't sure she was safe yet. She looked around the street with the kind of desperation that made Ronan's stomach twist, like she was searching for an exit that didn't exist. "Miss Cavanaugh," he said, stepping forward. She flinched, actually flinched. Then her eyes found his, and for a second neither of them moved. Her voice cracked. She swallowed, tried again. I am, but I'm not using that name anymore." Ronan frowned. "What?" "I changed it." She said it fast, like she was confessing to a crime. "On the journey. Legally. I have the papers. My name is Eliza Whitmore now." "Eliza Whitmore," Ronan repeated slowly. "Yes." She clutched her bag tighter. "I'm sorry. I should have written ahead, but there wasn't time, and I thought—" She stopped, looked down. "If you want to send me back, I'll understand." Ronan stared at her. Send her back? The woman looked like she'd barely survived getting here, and she was apologizing to him? "Why'd you change your name?" he asked. Eliza's jaw tightened. She glanced around, at Mrs. Pritchard, at the driver unloading her trunk, at the handful of people pretending not to stare. When she looked back at Ronan, her eyes were hard in a way that didn't match the tears. "Because the old one was ruined," she said quietly, "and I needed to start over." There it was. The truth, laid out plain. No excuses, no sugarcoating. Just a woman admitting she'd come here running from something. Ronan should have asked more questions, should have demanded details, should have probably done exactly what she expected, put her back on that stage and washed his hands of whatever mess she'd brought with her. But he didn't. Instead, he picked up her trunk, heavier than it looked, and nodded toward the wagon. Come on then, Eliza Whitmore. Let's get you home. The ride back to the ranch took an hour and a half. Ronan didn't talk much, and Eliza didn't seem to expect him to. She sat beside him on the wagon bench, her hands folded in her lap, staring at the landscape rolling past. The Wyoming frontier wasn't gentle. It was all wide sky and endless grass, broken up by rock formations that looked like they'd been there since the world began. Beautiful, maybe, if you were the kind of person who appreciated loneliness. Ronan glanced at her a few times. She'd stopped crying, at least. Her face had gone blank, shut down in a way he recognized. People wore that look when they were too tired to feel anything anymore. You ever been out west before? He asked finally. No? Her voice was quiet. I've never been anywhere, really. Just Philadelphia. It's different out here. I can see that. Another stretch of silence. Ronan shifted the reins, trying to figure out what to say. He wasn't good at this, talking to women, making them comfortable. Hell, he wasn't good at talking to anyone. Look, he said eventually, I don't know what happened back east, and I'm not going to ask. That's your business. But if you're here, you're here. I'm not sending you back unless you want to go. Eliza turned to look at him. Really look at him. Her eyes were gray-blue, he noticed, tired but sharp. Why? She asked. Why what? Why aren't you sending me back? You don't know me. I could be anything. A liar? A thief? Worse. Ronan shrugged. Could be. But you came all this way, and that counts for something. Besides, he hesitated, then said it. I wrote to that agency asking for a wife who could handle frontier life. Someone practical, tough. They sent me a school teacher from Philadelphia who changed her name to escape a scandal. He met her eyes. That tells me you're a survivor, and that's what I need. Eliza blinked. For a moment, Ronan thought she might start crying again, but instead something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile. More like the beginning of one. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet, Ronan said. You haven't seen the ranch, said. The ranch wasn't much to look at. A single-story house, weathered but solid. A barn, a corral, a chicken coop that leaned slightly to one side. Everything functional, nothing decorative. The kind of place built by someone who cared more about survival than aesthetics. Ronan pulled the wagon up to the house and climbed down. He reached for Eliza's trunk, but she was already moving, grabbing her smaller bag and stepping down on her own. She looked around, taking it all in. It's quiet, she said. Yeah. Ronan set the trunk on the porch. Nearest neighbor's about 8 miles that way. He pointed west. Town's the other direction. You get used to it. I think I'll like the quiet. Ronan unlocked the door and pushed it open. Inside, the house was dim and sparse. A front room with a fireplace, a kitchen that hadn't been updated in years, 2 small bedrooms, and not much else. Clean, though. Ronan wasn't a slob, even if he wasn't exactly house-proud. Eliza stepped inside, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. She walked slowly through the front room, running her fingers along the back of a chair, glancing at the cold fireplace, the bare walls. It needs work, Ronan said. I know it's not. It's fine, Eliza interrupted. She turned to face him. It's more than fine. It's honest. Ronan wasn't sure what that meant, but he nodded anyway. Your room's through there, he said, pointing to the door on the left. I'll take the other one. There's a wash basin, some linens, not much else, but you can fix it up however you want. Eliza looked at the door, then back at him. You're giving me my own room? Yeah. Why wouldn't I? She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was softer. Most men wouldn't. Ronan felt his face heat. He looked away, uncomfortable. Well, I'm not most men, and we're not... we haven't even... He cleared his throat. You just got here. You need space, time, whatever. For the second time that day, Eliza almost smiled. Thank you, Ronan. He nodded, still not looking at her. I'll bring your trunk in. You settle yourself. There's bread and some cold meat in the kitchen if you're hungry. I am, actually. Good. I'll be outside if you need anything. He left before she could say more, stepping back into the sunlight and closing the door behind him. He stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of her moving inside, unpacking, breathing. A woman in his house. After years of nothing but his own footsteps. It felt strange, foreign, but not bad. Eliza didn't come out of her room for over an hour. When she finally did, she'd changed into a simpler dress. Still dark, still practical, and pinned her hair back properly. She looked steadier, less like someone about to break. Ronan was in the kitchen, cutting bread. He glanced up when she appeared in the doorway. Feel better? He asked. A little. She hesitated, then stepped inside. Can I help? You don't have to. I want to. Ronan handed her the knife. All right, slice the rest of that. There's butter in the crock, meat wrapped in cloth. They worked in silence for a few minutes. Eliza's hands were steady, efficient. She moved around the kitchen like she knew what she was doing, even though everything was unfamiliar. You cook much? Ronan asked. Some. My mother taught me before she died. After that, I mostly took care of my father and younger brother. Where are they now? Eliza's hands paused, just for a second. My father passed 2 years ago. My brother's in Boston, married. He has his own life. And you had to leave. It wasn't a question. Eliza set the knife down carefully. Yes. Ronan waited, but she didn't offer more. That was fine. He wasn't going to push. They ate at the small kitchen table. The food wasn't fancy. Bread, butter, cold venison, some pickled vegetables Ronan had bought in town. But it was enough. Eliza ate slowly, deliberately, like she was trying to remember what normal felt like. So, Ronan said eventually, you're a teacher? I was, for 3 years, at a girls' school. You liked it? I loved it. Her voice softened. The girls were bright, curious. I taught them literature, history, some mathematics. It was the first time in my life I felt like I was doing something that mattered. What happened? Eliza's expression closed off. Someone spread a rumor, a lie. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. The school let me go anyway, said they couldn't risk the scandal. Ronan felt a flicker of anger on her behalf. That's bullshit. It's the world, Eliza said flatly. A woman's reputation is all she has. Once it's gone, it doesn't matter if she's innocent. She's ruined either way. So you came here. So I came here. She looked at him. To marry a stranger and start over, because it was the only option left. Ronan leaned back in his chair, studying her. She met his gaze without flinching. No tears now, just tired honesty. For what it's worth, he said, I don't care about rumors or reputations. Out here, the only thing that matters is whether you can pull your weight. And if I can't, then we'll figure it out. Eliza tilted her head slightly. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. She smiled then. A real one, small but genuine. It changed her whole face. Over the next few days, they settled into an uneasy rhythm. Ronan worked the land, mending fences, checking cattle, hauling water, while Eliza explored the house and began making it livable. She swept out dust that had been there for months, organized the kitchen, washed linens that probably should have been washed a year ago. She didn't complain, didn't ask for help. Just worked quietly, efficiently, like she was trying to prove something. Ronan watched her sometimes when she didn't notice. The way she moved through the house with a kind of determined grace. The way she talked to the chickens when she fed them, soft words he couldn't quite hear. The way she stood on the porch at dusk, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the horizon like she was still trying to believe she was really here. On the 4th day, he found her in the barn. She was standing in front of one of the stalls, looking at his mare, a sturdy brown horse named Belle. You ride? Ronan asked from the doorway. Eliza jumped slightly, then shook her head. No, I've never learned. Want to? She turned to face him, surprised. Really? Why not? You're going to be here a while. Might as well know how to get around on your own. Eliza hesitated, then nodded. All right. Yes, I'd like that. Ronan saddled Belle and led her outside. The horse was patient, used to Ronan's weight, but gentle enough for a beginner. He showed Eliza how to approach. how to hold the reins, how to mount without spooking the animal. Easy, he said as Eliza pulled herself up awkwardly. Don't jerk her. She'll follow your lead if you're calm. Eliza settled into the saddle, gripping the reins too tight. Belle shifted beneath her, and Eliza's eyes went wide. Relax, Ronan said. She feels your fear. Breathe. Eliza took a shaky breath. Then another. Slowly, her shoulders loosened. Belle's ears flicked back, listening. Good, Ronan said. Now just sit there for a minute. Get used to it. They stood like that for a while, Eliza on the horse, Ronan holding the lead, neither of them saying much. The sun was warm, the wind quiet. It was the most peaceful moment Ronan had felt in months. Thank you, Eliza said eventually. For what? For this. For not... She trailed off, searching for words. For not treating me like I'm broken. Ronan looked up at her. You're not broken. You're just starting over. There's a difference. Eliza's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She just nodded and held the reins a little steadier. A week passed. Then 2. Eliza proved herself over and over, not loudly, not dramatically, but in small, steady ways. She learned to bake bread that didn't come out like a brick. She fixed the wobbly table leg Ronan had been meaning to deal with for a year. She started keeping a ledger for the ranch expenses, organizing things Ronan had never bothered to track properly. And she asked questions, lots of them. Why do you keep the cattle in the north pasture instead of the south? Because the grass is better there, south side's too rocky. How often do you rotate them? Every few weeks, depending on the weather. And you do all this alone? I have been. Not anymore, I guess. Eliza would nod, file the information away, and move on to the next thing. She was building a mental map of the ranch, piece by piece, learning how it worked, how he worked. Ronan found himself doing the same with her, noticing the way she bit her lip when she was concentrating, the way she hummed sometimes when she thought no one was listening, the way she stiffened whenever he got too close, like she was bracing for something bad, and then relaxed when nothing happened. It made him angry, that reflex. Angry at whoever had taught her to expect the worst from men. One night, after supper, they sat on the porch together. The sky was on fire, orange and pink and deep purple. Eliza had her knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped around them. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why did you write to the agency? Why a mail-order bride instead of just finding someone here? Ronan leaned back against the railing, thinking. Not a lot of women out here, and the ones who are here, they've got their pick of men. Why would they choose a crippled rancher with a limp and no charm? You're not crippled. I'm not whole either. Eliza frowned. What happened? Fell off a horse 3 winters back, landed wrong, broke my hip. It healed, but not right. Some days it's fine. Some days I can barely walk. And you think that makes you less? Don't you? Eliza looked at him for a long moment. No, she said simply. I think it makes you real. Ronan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. After a while, Eliza spoke again, quieter this time. The rumor about me, the one that ruined everything. It was that I'd had an affair with a married man, one of the school's benefactors. Ronan went still. Did you? No. Her voice was flat. He propositioned me. I refused. So he told his wife I'd seduced him. She believed him. The school believed him. Everyone believed him. She laughed bitterly. A powerful man's word against a school teacher's. It wasn't even a contest. That's... Ronan bit off the curse. That's evil. That's the world. Not this world. Ronan turned to face her fully. Out here, your word's your own. Nobody else gets to define you. Eliza met his eyes. In the fading light, she looked younger, vulnerable, but also fierce in a way he was starting to understand. I want to believe that, she said. Then believe it. She held his gaze for another moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll try. The first real storm hit at the end of the 3rd week. Ronan had been expecting it. The sky had been building all day, heavy and dark, but Eliza hadn't seen anything like it. When the wind started howling and the rain came down in sheets, she stood at the window, eyes wide. Is this normal? She asked. For out here, yeah. Ronan was checking the shutters, making sure everything was secure. Could last a few hours, could last a few days. Days? Welcome to Wyoming. The storm didn't let up. By nightfall, the wind was rattling the windows and the rain was coming down so hard it sounded like gravel hitting the roof. Eliza helped Ronan move some of the furniture away from the walls in case of leaks, and they built up the fire to keep the chill out. They ended up sitting on the floor in front of the fireplace, wrapped in blankets. There wasn't much else to do. The storm was too loud for sleep, too wild for comfort. "Tell me about the ranch," Eliza said after a while. "How you built it?" Ronan shrugged. "Not much to tell. I came out here 6 years ago with some money I'd saved working cattle drives. Bought the land cheap because nobody wanted it. Built the house myself. Started with 10 head of cattle. Now I've got 40. That's a lot of work for one person." "It is." "Why do it alone?" Ronan stared into the fire. "Didn't have a choice at first. And then I got used to it, I guess. Alone's easier. No one to disappoint. No one to lose." "You sound like you've lost people before." "Haven't we all?" Eliza pulled her blanket tighter. "My mother died when I was 16. My father 5 years later. I thought my brother would stay close, but he married a woman who didn't like me much. After the scandal, he didn't even write to say goodbye." "That why you left?" "Part of it. But mostly I left because I couldn't breathe anymore. Every time I walked down the street, people would stare. Whisper. I was the woman who seduced a married man. The harlot, the liar. It didn't matter that none of it was true. The story was more interesting than the truth." Ronan looked at her. In the firelight, her face was all shadows and angles. Beautiful, he realized. Not in a delicate way. In a way that suggested strength. "You're not a liar," he said. "How do you know?" "Because liars don't cry when they step off a stagecoach. They don't apologize for things that aren't their fault. And they don't work as hard as you've been working to prove they belong." Eliza's eyes shimmered. "You barely know me." "I know enough." She looked away, blinking hard. "You're a good man, Ronan Hale." "I'm a practical man. There's a difference." "Maybe, but I'll take practical over cruel any day." They sat in silence after that, listening to the storm rage outside. At some point, Eliza's head drooped onto Ronan's shoulder. He stiffened at first, unsure, but then he relaxed. Let her rest. She was exhausted. He could feel it in the way she leaned into him, like she hadn't felt safe enough to sleep in months. Ronan stared at the fire and thought about everything that had brought them here. 2 broken people in a house in the middle of nowhere, hiding from the world. It should have felt like failure, but it didn't. It felt like the beginning of something real. The storm passed by morning, leaving the land muddy and the sky scrubbed clean. Ronan woke stiff and sore on the floor, Eliza still asleep against his shoulder. He eased away carefully, not wanting to wake her, and stepped outside. The ranch looked different in the aftermath. Battered, but standing. A few branches down, some fence posts leaning, nothing he couldn't fix. He was inspecting the barn when Eliza came outside, still wrapped in her blanket. "Everything all right?" she called. "Yeah, just checking for damage." She walked over, picking her way through the mud. "Can I help?" "You don't have to." "I know, but I want to." Ronan handed her a hammer. "All right, let's get to work." They spent the morning repairing what the storm had broken. It was hard, messy labor, but Eliza didn't complain. She learned fast how to drive a nail straight, how to brace a post, how to work alongside someone without getting in the way. By midday, they were both filthy and exhausted. "You're tougher than you look," Ronan said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Eliza grinned, actually grinned. "So are you," he laughed. The sound surprised him. When was the last time he'd laughed? That night, they ate together at the table. Beef stew Eliza had made from the supplies Ronan kept in the cellar. It was good, really good. Better than anything he'd cooked for himself in years. "This is amazing," he said. "It's just stew." "No, it's not. I don't know. It's home." Eliza looked at him across the table. Her expression softened. "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me be part of this. For not turning me away when you had every reason to." Ronan set down his spoon. "Eliza, you're not just part of this. You're making it better." She blinked, clearly caught off guard. "I mean it," Ronan said. "This place was just existing before you got here. Now it feels like something worth fighting for. Eliza's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. You're going to make me cry again. Then cry. Doesn't bother me. She laughed, shaky but real. You're impossible. So are you. They finished dinner in comfortable silence. And later, sitting on the porch under a sky full of stars, Ronan realized something that both terrified and thrilled him. He was starting to fall for his mail-order bride, the woman who'd arrived in tears and changed her name to escape a scandal. The woman who was tougher, smarter, and braver than anyone he'd ever met. And if the way she looked at him sometimes was any indication, she might be falling for him too. The realization didn't change things overnight. Ronan wasn't the kind of man who made grand declarations, and Eliza wasn't the kind of woman who expected them. What changed was smaller, quieter. The way they moved around each other in the kitchen without bumping into one another anymore. The way Ronan started leaving his bedroom door open at night, just in case she needed something. The way Eliza stopped flinching when his hand brushed hers, passing a plate or a tool. Trust, Ronan was learning, wasn't built in moments. It was built in days, weeks. The slow accumulation of someone showing up and not hurting you. By the end of the first month, Eliza had transformed the ranch house into something that felt almost lived in. Curtains hung in the windows, simple muslin she'd bought on their last trip to town, and hemmed herself. The kitchen smelled like herbs she'd started growing in chipped clay pots on the windowsill. She'd even talked Ronan into building her a small bookshelf, which now held the handful of books she'd brought from Philadelphia, along with a few she'd ordered through the general store. You read a lot, Ronan observed one evening, watching her turn pages by lamplight. It's how I survived, Eliza said without looking up. When the world got too loud, I could disappear into someone else's story for a while. What are you reading now? She held up the spine. Shakespeare. The Tempest. Ronan made a face. Never understood that stuff. All the fancy language. It's not about the language. It's about what's underneath. Eliza set the book down, her expression thoughtful. This one's about forgiveness. Starting over. Building something new from the wreckage of what was. Sounds familiar. Doesn't it? She smiled. Maybe that's why I picked it. Ronan wanted to say something, wanted to tell her that she didn't need Shakespeare to understand starting over, that she was living it every damn day. But the words stuck in his throat the way they always did when things mattered. So instead, he just nodded and went back to mending the harness in his lap. The silence between them had become comfortable. That was something. The next morning, Ronan woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. He dressed quickly, his hip aching less than usual, and found Eliza in the kitchen humming something he didn't recognize. She'd tied her hair back with a ribbon, and there was flour on her cheek. "Morning," she said brightly. "I made biscuits." "I can see that." Ronan poured himself coffee, strong and black, the way he liked it. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd make myself useful." They ate at the table, and Ronan watched her over the rim of his cup. She looked different than she had that first day off the stagecoach. Less haunted. Her face had filled out a little. She'd been too thin when she arrived, and there was color in her cheeks now. The constant work and fresh air agreed with her. "I was thinking," Eliza said, breaking a biscuit in half, "about the chicken coop." "What about it?" "It's falling apart. The hens are getting out through the gaps in the wood, and I found a snake in there yesterday." Ronan frowned. "You didn't tell me about a snake." "I handled it, but the point is we need to rebuild it, properly this time." "We?" "Yes, we. I can help. I'm not useless with a hammer." Ronan raised an eyebrow. "Never said you were." "Then it's settled. After breakfast, we'll start." He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her it was too much work, that she didn't need to prove anything. But the determined set of her jaw told him she'd already made up her mind. And honestly, he liked that about her, the way she didn't wait for permission, the way she just decided something needed doing and did it. "All right," he said. "We'll rebuild the damn chicken coop." Eliza grinned. "Good, because I already sketched out a plan." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her apron pocket and spread it on the table. Ronan leaned forward, studying the rough drawing. It was actually pretty good, clean lines, measurements noted in the margins, even a little door for collecting eggs. "Where'd you learn to draw plans?" he asked. "My father was a carpenter before he got sick. I used to watch him work." Her voice softened. "He taught me to measure twice and cut once. Said it saved money and frustration. Smart man. He was. Eliza refolded the paper. So, what do you think? Ronan looked at the sketch again, then at her. I think you're full of surprises, Eliza Whitmore. Is that a yes? That's a yes. They spent the next 3 days tearing down the old coop and building a new one from scratch. It was hard, sweaty work, and Eliza proved herself over and over. She didn't complain when splinters dug into her hands or when the sun beat down so hard Ronan thought they might both melt. She just kept working, kept measuring, kept holding board steady while he hammered. You're stronger than you look, Ronan said on the second day, watching her lift a beam into place. You've said that before. Still true. Eliza wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. I had to be strong. After my mother died, there was no one else to take care of things. My father tried, but he was sick more often than not. My brother was too young, so I learned. That's a lot to carry. It was. But it taught me I could survive more than I thought. She looked at him, her eyes serious. That's the thing about hardship, isn't it? You don't realize how much you can endure until you have no choice. Ronan nodded slowly. He understood that, had lived it. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. By the third day, the new chicken coop was finished. It was sturdy, level, and had a proper roof that wouldn't leak when the rains came. Eliza stood back, hands on her hips, surveying their work with obvious satisfaction. We did good, she said. We did. Think the chickens will appreciate it? Chickens don't appreciate anything, but at least they'll stop getting eaten by foxes. Eliza laughed. The sound was becoming more common, and Ronan realized he'd started listening for it, waiting for it even. That evening, they sat on the porch as the sun went down. Eliza had brought out 2 cups of tea, something she'd started doing in the evenings, a habit from back east that Ronan found he didn't mind. The air was cooling, the sky turning that particular shade of purple that only happened in Wyoming. Can I ask you something personal? Eliza said after a while. Ronan tensed slightly. Depends on what it is. Why didn't you ever marry before? Before the agency, I mean. He took a long sip of tea, buying time. Never found the right person, I guess. And then I got hurt, and it seemed like even less of a possibility. Because of your hip? Because I wasn't whole anymore. Didn't seem fair to ask someone to take on a broken man. Eliza was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. You're not broken, Ronan. You're just scarred. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. She set her cup down. Broken means you can't function. Scarred means you survived something and kept going. That's not weakness. That's strength. Ronan looked at her. In the fading light, she was all soft edges and shadows. He wanted to reach for her hand, wanted to close the space between them. But he didn't. Not yet. You really believe that? He asked. I have to. Otherwise, what does that make me? The vulnerability in her voice made his chest ache. It makes you the bravest person I know. Eliza's breath caught. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she stood abruptly, gathering the cups. I should wash these before bed. Eliza, good night, Ronan. She disappeared inside before he could say anything else. Ronan sat there alone, staring at the empty space where she'd been, and cursed himself for not being braver, for not saying what he really wanted to say. But maybe that was the problem. He didn't know what he wanted to say, didn't know how to put into words what was happening between them. All he knew was that Eliza Whitmore had walked into his life crying and desperate, and somehow, in the space of a month, she'd become the thing he looked forward to most. The first Sunday in November, Ronan suggested they go to town. Eliza had been avoiding it, he could tell, but they were running low on supplies, and she couldn't hide forever. I don't know, she said when he brought it up. People will talk. People always talk, let them. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they'll be whispering about. Ronan leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. They'll whisper either way. Might as well give them something real to look at. Eliza bit her lip, clearly torn. Finally, she sighed. Fine, but if anyone asks questions, I'll handle it. Ronan, I said I'll handle it. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, we'll go to town. Cartwell on a Sunday was busier than usual. The church had just let out, and people were milling around the main street talking in clusters. Ronan helped Eliza down from the wagon and immediately felt the weight of eyes on them. Mrs. Pritchard was standing outside the boarding house with two other women, and all three of them were staring. "Ignore them," Ronan muttered. "Hard to ignore that much judgment," Eliza muttered back. They walked into the general store together. Mr. Davison, the owner, looked up from behind the counter and did a double take when he saw Eliza. "Ronan," he said carefully, "and this must be your bride?" "This is Eliza," Ronan said. "My wife." The word felt strange on his tongue. They hadn't actually married yet, hadn't even talked about when they would, but saying it out loud felt right, protective. Eliza's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't correct him. Instead, she stepped forward and extended her hand. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Davison." Davison shook her hand, his expression cautious. "Likewise, ma'am. What can I get for you folks today?" They gave him their list, and while he gathered the supplies, Ronan could feel people watching through the store's front window. Eliza noticed too. Her shoulders had gone tight, her face carefully blank. "Relax," Ronan said quietly. "You're doing fine. I feel like I'm on display." "You are, but that doesn't mean they get to make you feel small." She glanced at him, surprised. Then something shifted in her expression. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin. "You're right, they don't." When they left the store, supplies loaded in the wagon, Mrs. Pritchard was waiting. She stepped directly into their path, hands folded primly in front of her. "Mr. Hale," she said. "A word?" "Make it quick," Ronan said. "We've got a long ride back." Mrs. Pritchard's gaze slid to Eliza. "I just wanted to welcome your companion to town. We don't get many new faces out here." "She's not my companion. She's my wife." "Of course." Mrs. Pritchard's smile was tight. "It's just that we heard she came from back east rather suddenly, and under, well, unusual circumstances." Ronan felt his jaw clench. What circumstances would those be? "Oh, you know how people talk. Something about a scandal, a married man. I'm sure it's all just gossip, but—" "It is," Eliza said suddenly. Her voice was clear and steady. "It's gossip, nothing more. A lie told by a man who didn't like being refused." Mrs. Pritchard blinked. "Refused?" "Yes, refused. He propositioned me. I said no, so he lied to protect his own reputation." Eliza stepped closer, and there was steel in her eyes now. "If you're going to judge me, Mrs. Pritchard, at least have the decency to judge me for something I actually did." For a moment, Mrs. Pritchard looked genuinely flustered. Then her face hardened. "Well, I suppose time will tell what kind of woman you really are." "I suppose it will," Eliza said calmly. "Good day, Mrs. Pritchard." She turned and climbed into the wagon without waiting for a response. Ronan followed, biting back a smile. As they pulled away, he glanced at Eliza. "That was something," he said. "I'm tired of being ashamed of things I didn't do." "Good. You shouldn't be." Eliza looked at him, and for the first time since they'd arrived in town, she smiled. "Thank you for calling me your wife." Seemed like the right thing to say. "Was it just for show, or did you mean it?" Ronan's hands tightened on the reins. This was it. The moment where he could either step forward or step back. He thought about the past month, about the way Eliza had fit herself into his life so seamlessly, it was like she'd always been there, about the way she made him laugh, made him want to be better. "I meant it," he said. "If you'll have me." Eliza's breath hitched. "Are you asking me to marry you for real?" "Yeah, I guess I am." She was quiet for so long Ronan started to think he'd misread everything. Then she reached over and placed her hand on his. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I'll marry you." Ronan felt something loosen in his chest, something he hadn't realized was clenched tight. "Good. That's good." "Very eloquent, Mr. Hale." "Shut up, Mrs. Hale." Eliza laughed, and Ronan thought it might be the best sound he'd ever heard. They were married 3 weeks later by the circuit preacher who passed through Cartwell once a month. It wasn't a big ceremony, just the two of them, the preacher and Mr. Davison and his wife as witnesses. Eliza wore a simple blue dress she'd sewn herself, and Ronan wore his cleanest shirt and the only tie he owned. When the preacher asked if he took Eliza to be his wife, Ronan didn't hesitate. "I do." And when Eliza said the same, her voice steady and sure, Ronan felt something settle deep in his bones. This was real. She was real, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. The kiss was brief, almost awkward. They were still learning each other, still figuring out how to be close, but it was theirs. That was what mattered. That night, they had dinner at the boarding house. Mrs. Pritchard's doing, though she looked like she'd swallowed something sour the entire time. A few townspeople showed up to offer congratulations, most of them curious more than kind. But Ronan didn't care. He sat next to his wife, his hand resting on the back of her chair, and let the gossips stare. When they finally made it back to the ranch, well past dark, Eliza stood in the doorway of the house and looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. "What is it?" Ronan asked. "It's ours now," she said. "Really ours. It's been ours for weeks." "I know, but now it's official." She turned to face him, her eyes bright. "I have a home again, Ronan. A real one." Ronan stepped closer, his hand finding hers. "So do I." They stood there in the doorway, neither of them moving to go inside. The night was cold, the stars sharp and clear overhead. Finally, Eliza spoke. "I know we said separate rooms," she said quietly, "but tonight, could you stay with me? Just to sleep. I don't want to be alone." Ronan's heart kicked hard against his ribs. "Yeah, I can do that." They went to her room, the one she'd made her own with books and curtains, and the little things that made it feel lived in. Eliza changed behind a screen while Ronan sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since he was a boy. When she emerged, she was wearing a simple nightgown, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked younger, vulnerable, but also certain. "Come here," she said. Ronan stood, crossed the small space between them. Eliza reached up, her hands gentle, and began unbuttoning his shirt. He froze. "Eliza, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," she said softly. "I just want to be close to you. Is that all right?" Ronan swallowed hard. "Yeah, that's all right." She finished with the buttons, pushed the shirt off his shoulders. Her fingers traced the scar on his collarbone, an old injury from a cattle drive years ago, and then the line of his ribs. Ronan stood perfectly still, barely breathing, letting her explore. "You're beautiful," she whispered. Ronan let out a shaky laugh. "No one's ever called me that before." Then they weren't looking hard enough. She took his hand and led him to the bed. They lay down together, awkward at first, trying to figure out how to fit. But then Eliza curled into his side, her head on his chest, and Ronan wrapped his arm around her. And it was easy, natural. "Thank you," Eliza whispered. "For what?" "For being patient, for not expecting more than I can give right now." Ronan pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I'll wait as long as you need." "I know. That's why I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Ronan's breath caught. He wanted to say it back, wanted to tell her that he loved her too, that she'd become the center of his world without him even realizing it. But the words stuck. So instead, he held her tighter, and hoped that was enough. Eliza fell asleep first, her breathing evening out, her body going slack against his. Ronan lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her trust like a precious thing he didn't want to break. He'd spent so many years alone, convinced himself he was better off that way. But now, with Eliza in his arms, he couldn't imagine going back to that emptiness. The next few weeks were a blur of work and small, stolen moments. Winter was coming, and there was a lot to do to prepare. They spent their days chopping wood, storing food, reinforcing the barn against the snow that would inevitably bury them for months. Eliza took to frontier life like she'd been born to it. She learned to shoot. Ronan taught her with an old rifle, patient and steady, until she could hit a target more often than not. She learned to butcher a chicken without flinching. She learned to read the sky for weather, the way Ronan did, watching for the kind of clouds that meant trouble. And she learned him. The way he favored his left leg on cold mornings. The way he went quiet when he was thinking hard about something. The way he always checked the livestock one last time before bed, even when he was dead tired. "You worry too much," she told him one night as he came back from the barn. "Someone has to." "We could share the worry. That's what partners do, isn't it?" Ronan stopped, looked at her standing in the doorway with lamplight behind her. "Yeah, I guess it is." She stepped aside to let him in, and he brushed past her, his hand grazing her waist. It was a small touch, barely anything, but it sent heat through him all the same. They were getting closer, slowly, carefully, learning to be married in all the ways that mattered. One afternoon in late November, Ronan came back from checking the north pasture to find Eliza sitting at the kitchen table with a letter in her hands. She looked pale. "What is it?" he asked, shrugging out of his coat. "It's from my brother." Her voice was tight. "He heard I got married. He wants to know if I'm all right." Ronan pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "What'd you tell him?" "I haven't written back yet. I don't know what to say." "Tell him the truth." "Which is?" "That you're fine. Better than fine. That you've got a home and a husband who'd do anything to keep you safe." Eliza looked up at him, her eyes shining. "He didn't defend me, Ronan. When the scandal happened, he just let me go. Said it was easier for everyone if I left. Then he's a coward. He's my brother. Doesn't make him less of a coward." Ronan reached across the table, took her hand. "But that doesn't mean you can't forgive him, if you want to." Eliza stared at their joined hands. "I don't know if I do." "Then don't. Not yet. But keep the door open. You might change your mind." She nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." That night, Eliza wrote back. Ronan didn't ask what she said, but when she sealed the letter and set it aside, she looked lighter, less burdened. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't do anything." "You did. You reminded me I get to choose who I let into my life now. That's not nothing." Ronan pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "You're stronger than you think, Eliza Hale." "Maybe, but I'm glad I don't have to be strong alone anymore." Winter hit hard in early December. The first snow came overnight, and by morning the world was buried under a foot of white. Ronan and Eliza worked together to clear paths to the barn and the chicken coop, their breath fogging in the frozen air. "Is it always like this?" Eliza asked, shivering despite her heavy coat. "Sometimes worse. You'll get used to it." "I'm not sure I want to." Ronan grinned. "Too late now. You're stuck here." "Lucky me." But she was smiling when she said it, and when they finished shoveling and stumbled back inside, half frozen and exhausted, she made hot coffee, and they sat by the fire until feeling returned to their fingers. "Tell me something," Eliza said, cradling her cup. "Something I don't know about you." Ronan thought for a moment. "I wanted to be a doctor once, when I was a kid." Eliza's eyebrows shot up. "Really?" "Yeah, seemed like a good way to help people. But my family didn't have money for schooling, and then my father died and I had to work. So that was that." "Do you regret it?" "Sometimes, but I like what I do, building something from nothing, making the land work for me." He paused. "What about you? What did you want to be?" "A writer." Eliza's voice was wistful. "I used to write stories when I was young, made up worlds where everything worked out the way it should." "You still write?" "Not in a long time. Teaching took up all my energy, and then everything fell apart, and I couldn't find the words anymore." Ronan set down his cup. "Maybe you'll find them again." "Maybe." She looked at him, her expression soft. "You make me feel like anything's possible. You know that?" "That's because anything is possible. Out here, you get to decide who you are." Eliza leaned over and kissed him. It was slow, gentle, and when she pulled back, Ronan's heart was racing. "I love you," she said. "I need you to know that." Ronan cupped her face in his hands. "I love you too." The words came easier this time. And when Eliza kissed him again, deeper now, Ronan let himself fall into it, let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved this, deserved her. They made love that night for the first time. It was tentative and imperfect, full of whispered reassurances and nervous laughter. But it was theirs, and when it was over, Eliza curled into Ronan's arms and fell asleep with a smile on her face. Ronan lay awake listening to the wind howl outside and thought about how far they'd both come. From two broken people to this, to a marriage that felt real and solid and worth fighting for. Winter would be long, hard, but they'd face it together, and that made all the difference. The first blizzard came in mid-December, 3 days before Christmas. Ronan woke to a silence so complete it felt wrong, and when he looked out the window, all he saw was white. Not falling snow, the storm had passed in the night, but drifts so high they'd buried the bottom half of the barn door. Eliza stirred beside him, her warmth a comfort against the cold seeping through the walls. She opened her eyes, blinked at the gray light filtering through the frost-covered window. Is it always this quiet after a storm? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. Yeah, snow swallows everything. Ronan sat up, wincing as his hip protested. The cold made it worse. We need to dig out before the livestock freeze. They dressed in layers, wool and flannel, and anything that might keep the wind out, and stepped into a world transformed. The snow came up to Ronan's thighs in places, and the wind had sculpted it into strange, hard-packed shapes. The barn was barely visible through the white. Stay close, Ronan said, handing Eliza a shovel. You get turned around in this, you won't find your way back. They worked for 2 hours, carving a path to the barn, one shovelful at a time. Eliza's face went red with cold and effort, but she didn't complain. Just kept digging, her breath coming in sharp white bursts. When they finally reached the barn and wrenched the door open, the cattle were huddled together, their breath steaming in the dim interior. Alive, at least. Ronan checked each one while Eliza hauled in fresh hay and water. Her hands shook from the cold, but she moved with determination. How long will this last? She asked when they were back inside the house, peeling off frozen layers. The snow? Could be weeks before it melts. Weeks. Eliza sat heavily in a chair. We're trapped here. We've got enough food, enough wood, we'll be fine. I know. It's just... She trailed off, staring at the fire Ronan was building. I've never been this isolated before. Ronan struck a match, watched the kindling catch. Gets to some people. The quiet, the sameness of every day. Does it get to you? Used to, before you came. He looked at her over his shoulder. Now I kind of like it. Eliza's expression softened. Me too. The days blurred together after that. They fell into a rhythm born of necessity. Wake early, tend the animals, chop wood, cook, eat, sleep. The work was relentless, the cold, unforgiving, but they had each other. That made the difference. On Christmas Eve, Eliza surprised him. She'd used some of their precious flour and sugar to bake a cake, and she'd wrapped a small package in brown paper and string. When Ronan came in from the barn, she was waiting with both. What's this? He asked, eyeing the package suspiciously. It's Christmas tomorrow. I wanted to give you something. Eliza, you didn't have to... Open it. He untied the string carefully, unfolded the paper. Inside was a pair of wool socks, thick and warm, knitted in a pattern he didn't recognize. The stitches were tight and even, the work of someone who knew what they were doing. You made these? He asked. I started them the week after I arrived. I wasn't sure I'd finish in time, but... She smiled shyly. Your old ones have more holes than fabric. Ronan ran his thumb over the soft wool. No one had made him anything in years, maybe ever. Thank you. You're welcome. He set the socks aside and reached for his coat. Where are you going? Eliza asked, confused. I'll be right back. He went to the barn to a corner where he'd hidden something weeks ago. When he returned, he was carrying a small wooden box, rough but functional. He'd made it himself, working on it in stolen moments when Eliza was occupied elsewhere. Your turn, he said, handing it to her. Eliza opened the box slowly. Inside was a set of carving tools, small knives with smooth wooden handles. Each one fitted perfectly to her smaller hands. She lifted one out, tested the weight. I remembered you said your father was a carpenter, Ronan said. Thought maybe you'd like to try it yourself. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Ronan, this is... I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. She set the box down carefully and threw her arms around him. Ronan held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, wood smoke and the lavender soap she'd bought in town. I love you, she whispered against his chest. I love you too. They ate cake by the fire that night, and Eliza tried out the carving tools on a piece of scrap wood. Her first attempts were clumsy, the cuts uneven, but she laughed at her mistakes instead of getting frustrated. Ronan watched her work, feeling something warm and solid settle in his chest. This was what home felt like. Not the house or the land, but this. Eliza carving by lamplight, her face intent and happy, the two of them together in the quiet. January brought more snow and temperatures so cold the water in the wash basin froze overnight. Ronan's hip got worse, the pain sharp and constant. He tried to hide it, but Eliza noticed everything. You're limping more, she said one morning as he struggled into his boots. It's the cold. I'm fine. You're not fine. Let me help. There's nothing to help with. It is what it is. Eliza knelt in front of him, her hands gentle on his knee. Does it always hurt? Or just when you move? Mostly when I move, sometimes when I don't. Ronan exhaled hard. It's worse in winter. Always has been. Then let me do the heavy work today. You stay inside, keep the fire going. Eliza, I'm not asking, Ronan. I'm telling you. Her voice was firm. You push yourself too hard. Let me carry some of the weight for once. He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her he could handle it. But the truth was, he couldn't. Not today. So he nodded. All right, but if anything goes wrong, I'll come get you, I promise. She bundled up and headed out to the barn while Ronan stayed by the fire, feeling useless and frustrated. He'd never been good at accepting help, never been good at admitting weakness, but Eliza made it easier somehow, made it feel less like failure and more like partnership. When she came back an hour later, her cheeks were bright red and her clothes were covered in snow, but she was smiling. Everyone's fed and watered, she announced, and I think one of the hens might be ready to lay soon. In winter? I know, it's strange, but I checked, and she's definitely nesting. Ronan shook his head, amazed. You're something else, you know that? I'm learning. Eliza peeled off her wet coat and hung it by the fire. And I like it, being useful, being needed. You are. More than you know. She came to sit beside him, pressing her cold hands against his warm ones. How's your hip? Better now that I'm not moving. Good. Then stay put. I'll make lunch. The next few weeks tested them in ways Ronan hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the cold or the work. It was the closeness, the inability to escape each other even for a moment. In summer, you could walk away, cool off, come back when you'd settled. In winter, trapped inside by walls of snow, there was nowhere to go. They had their first real fight in late January, over something stupid. Ronan couldn't even remember what started it. Something about the way Eliza had organized the pantry, or maybe the way he'd snapped at her for moving his tools. But it escalated fast, both of them saying things they didn't mean. You act like I'm in the way, Eliza said, her voice sharp, like I'm some burden you have to carry. That's not, I never said that. You don't have to say it. I can see it in your face every time I try to help. Ronan stood, his hands clenched. Maybe because you don't know what you're doing half the time. Maybe because I'm worried you'll get hurt. I'm not a child, Ronan. I don't need you to protect me from everything. I'm not trying to protect you from everything. I'm trying to keep you alive. The words hung between them, too loud in the small room. Eliza's eyes flashed. Is that all this is to you, keeping me alive? Making sure your investment doesn't die? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Ronan opened his mouth, closed it. He didn't know what he meant. He just knew he was scared. Scared she'd get hurt. Scared she'd realize she'd made a mistake coming here. Scared she'd leave. I'm scared, he said finally, the words rough. All right? I'm scared you'll get hurt and I won't be able to fix it. Eliza's anger drained away. She crossed the room, took his hands. I'm scared too. But we can't live like this, Ronan. Tiptoeing around each other, afraid to let the other person struggle. We have to trust each other. I do trust you. Then show me. Let me fail sometimes. Let me figure things out on my own. Ronan closed his eyes. I don't know if I can. Try. For me. He nodded slowly. Okay. I'll try. They didn't talk much the rest of that day, both of them processing what had been said. But that night, lying in bed, Eliza reached for his hand in the dark. I'm sorry, she whispered, for what I said, about being an investment. I'm sorry, too, for treating you like you're fragile. I am fragile sometimes. But so are you. Ronan turned to face her, even though he couldn't see her clearly in the darkness. Yeah, I guess I am. We're allowed to be, as long as we're honest about it. He pulled her closer, and she came willingly, fitting herself against him. I'll work on that. Me too. February brought a thaw, brief but merciful. The snow started to melt, creating rivers of mud and slush everywhere. Ronan and Eliza took advantage of the break in the weather to repair damage from the winter storms and restock supplies in town. Cartwell looked different under the weak February sun. People were out, moving around after weeks of being trapped inside. Mrs. Pritchard was sweeping her porch when they arrived, and she gave them a curt nod that might have been friendly if you squinted. At the general store, Mr. Davison greeted them warmly. "Good to see you folks. Wasn't sure anyone would make it through this winter." "We made it," Ronan said. "Barely. That's all that counts." Davison began gathering their order. "How's married life treating you?" Eliza and Ronan exchanged a glance. "It has its moments," Eliza said diplomatically. Davison chuckled. "Don't they all? My wife and I nearly killed each other our first winter, but we're still here 40 years later, so I guess it worked out." As they loaded supplies into the wagon, a young woman approached. She was maybe 20, with blonde hair and a nervous smile. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Mrs. Hale?" Eliza blinked. "Yes, can I help you?" "My name is Sarah Brennan. I heard you used to be a teacher back east." "I was. Why?" Sarah glanced around, then lowered her voice. "There's no school here, no one to teach the children. I was wondering, would you consider it? Teaching, I mean. We could pay a little. Not much, but something." Eliza looked stunned. I don't know. Please, just think about it. We have 8 children in town who can't read or write properly. They need someone." After Sarah left, Eliza stood by the wagon, staring at nothing. "You want to do it?" Ronan said. "It wasn't a question. I don't know if I should." "Why not?" "Because of what happened before. What if someone finds out? What if the rumors follow me even here?" Ronan leaned against the wagon. "Eliza, you can't spend your whole life hiding from what other people might think. If you want to teach, teach. What about the ranch? You need help." "I'll manage. I did before you came." "That's not the same, and you know it." "No, it's not. But I don't want to be the reason you give up something you love." He took her hand. "If teaching makes you happy, then do it. I'll support you, whatever you need." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "You mean that?" "Yeah, I do." She threw her arms around him right there in the middle of the street, not caring who saw. "Thank you. Thank you." A week later, Eliza started teaching in the back room of the church. 8 children showed up that first day, ranging from 6 to 14. They were rough, most of them, children of ranchers and miners, more comfortable with animals and tools than books. But they were eager. Eliza came home that first evening exhausted and exhilarated. "They're so bright," she told Ronan over dinner. "They just need someone to show them." One of the boys, Tommy, he's already reading at a level far beyond his age. And the oldest girl, Margaret, she wants to learn everything. Ronan smiled, watching her talk with her hands, her face animated in a way he hadn't seen before. "You're good at this." "I forgot how much I loved it, how much it matters." "Then keep doing it." She did. 3 days a week, Eliza rode into town to teach while Ronan handled the ranch. It was harder without her, and his hip protested the extra work, but he didn't complain. Seeing Eliza come alive again was worth any amount of pain. The children adored her. Within a month, 2 more families had sent their kids to her makeshift school. Eliza started staying later, helping the older ones with advanced reading and arithmetic. She brought home stories about their progress, their questions, their small triumphs. "Margaret wants to be a nurse," Eliza said one night. "She asked if I thought it was possible for a girl from Wyoming to do something like that." "What'd you tell her?" "That anything's possible if you work hard enough. That I came from nothing and look where I am now." Ronan reached across the table, took her hand. "You came from everything. You just had to leave to find it." The snows returned in March, one last brutal storm that dumped 2 feet overnight. Ronan woke to the sound of something crashing in the barn. He was up and dressed before Eliza even stirred, grabbing his coat and heading into the blizzard. The barn door had blown open, and snow was pouring inside. 3 of the cattle had panicked, breaking through a weakened section of fence. Ronan spent an hour in waist-deep snow, trying to herd them back, his hips screaming with every step. By the time he got them secured and the door fixed, he could barely stand. He limped back to the house, his leg dragging, and collapsed just inside the door. Eliza found him there. "Ronan, what happened?" "Cattle got loose." "Fixed it." His teeth were chattering so hard he could barely speak. She helped him to the bed, stripped off his wet clothes, piled blankets on top of him. His skin was gray, his lips blue. She'd never seen anyone that cold before. "Stay with me," she said, climbing under the blankets with him, using her body heat to warm him. "Don't you dare leave me, Ronan Hale." "Not planning on it," he mumbled. It took hours before the shaking stopped. Eliza held him the entire time, talking to him, keeping him conscious. When he finally fell asleep, she stayed awake, watching his chest rise and fall, terrified that if she looked away, he'd stop breathing. When Ronan woke the next morning, weak but alive, Eliza was still there. "You stayed," he said, his voice hoarse. "Of course I stayed. Where else would I be?" He reached for her hand. "I thought I was going to die out there." "So did I," Eliza's voice cracked. "And I realized something. I can't do this without you. I don't want to." "You're stronger than you think." "Maybe. But I don't want to find out. I want you here, with me, always." Ronan pulled her down, kissed her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. Promise you'll be more careful." "I promise." Recovery took longer than Ronan expected. His hip had worsened from the strain, and for 2 weeks he could barely walk. Eliza took over everything, the ranch, the teaching, the house. She was exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she never complained. "You need to rest," Ronan told her one evening as she stumbled through the door. "So do you." "I'm serious, Eliza. You're running yourself into the ground." "What choice do I have? The work doesn't stop just because we're tired." She was right, but watching her push herself to the breaking point made Ronan feel helpless and useless. He hated it, hated being the one who needed care instead of giving it. One night, he heard her crying in the kitchen, soft, muffled sobs she thought he couldn't hear. He got up, ignoring the pain in his hip, and found her sitting at the table with her head in her hands. "Hey," he said gently, "what's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm fine." "You're crying. That's not fine." Eliza looked up, her face blotchy and wet. "I'm just tired. So tired, Ronan. And I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." He sat beside her, pulled her into his arms. "Then don't. We'll figure something else out." "There is nothing else. We need the money for my teaching, and the ranch needs tending, and you need to heal. There's no other option." "Then we ask for help." "From who?" Ronan thought for a moment. "The Davisons. Maybe some of the other ranchers. People help each other out here. That's how it works. I don't want to owe anyone. It's not owing, it's community. It's what people do." Eliza was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, we'll ask." The next Sunday, after Eliza's teaching session, they approached the Davisons. Ronan explained the situation, his injury, the ranch work, their struggle to keep up. He hated every word, hated admitting he couldn't handle things on his own. But he did it anyway. For Eliza. Mr. Davison listened quietly, then nodded. "My nephew's been looking for work. He could help out a few days a week until you're back on your feet. Won't charge much." "I can't." "You can and you will. That's what neighbors do, Ronan. We look after each other." By the end of the week, a young man named James was showing up 3 mornings a week to help with the heavy work. He was green but willing, and having him around took the pressure off. Eliza could focus on teaching. Ronan could focus on healing. Spring came slowly, reluctantly. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass and mud. The days grew longer, warmer. Ronan's hip improved with the better weather, though it would never be what it was before. One evening in April, Eliza came home from teaching with news. "They want to build a real school. The town, I mean. They're raising money, and they want me to be the permanent teacher." Ronan set down the harness he was mending. "What'd you tell them?" "I said I'd think about it." "Why? It's what you want, isn't it?" "Yes, but it would mean more time away from the ranch, from you. I don't know if that's fair." Ronan stood, crossed to where she was standing. "Eliza, listen to me. You are not responsible for making me your whole world. You're allowed to have something that's yours, something that makes you happy." "The ranch makes me happy. You make me happy. I know, but you need more than just me. And that's okay." He cupped her face in his hands. "Take the job. Build the school. I'll be here when you get home." Eliza's eyes searched his. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." She kissed him, hard and grateful. "I love you so much." "I love you too. Now go change the world, Mrs. Hale." She did. Over the next 2 months, Eliza threw herself into building the school. She organized fundraisers, wrote letters to potential donors, convinced the town council to donate land. She was tireless, passionate, and watching her work was like watching someone come fully alive. The school opened in June, a small but solid building on the edge of town. 15 children enrolled that first day, with more expected by fall. Eliza stood in front of her new classroom, and Ronan stood in the back, watching her teach with pride swelling in his chest. This was what she was meant to do, and he'd been part of making it possible. That night, back at the ranch, they celebrated with a simple dinner and a bottle of whiskey Ronan had been saving. "To new beginnings," Eliza said, raising her glass. "To you," Ronan corrected, "for not letting the past define you." They drank, and then Eliza set down her glass and looked at him seriously. "I need to tell you something." Ronan's stomach tightened. "What?" "I wrote to my brother. A real letter this time. I told him everything. About you, about the ranch, about the school, about how I'm happy." "What'd he say?" "He apologized for not defending me, for letting me leave without a fight. He wants to visit, to meet you." Ronan exhaled slowly. "How do you feel about that?" "Scared, angry, still, but also hopeful. Maybe people can change. Maybe he has." "Do you want him to visit?" "I think so. I think I need to see if we can fix what's broken between us." Ronan reached for her hand. "Then invite him. We'll face it together." Eliza squeezed his hand tight. "Together. I like the sound of that." Eliza's brother arrived on a Tuesday in late July, stepping off the stagecoach with a traveling case and an expression that looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. Thomas Cavanaugh was 31, tall and lean, with the same gray-blue eyes as his sister. He wore a city suit that was already dusty from the journey, and when he spotted Eliza waiting, his face crumpled with something between relief and shame. Eliza didn't move at first. She stood beside Ronan, her hand tight in his, watching her brother approach. Ronan could feel the tension radiating off her in waves. "Eliza," Thomas said, stopping a few feet away. His voice was hoarse. "You look well." "So do you." The silence stretched between them, awkward and painful. Finally, Thomas looked at Ronan. "You must be the husband." "Ronan Hale." Ronan extended his hand. Thomas shook it, his grip firm but brief. "Thomas Cavanaugh. Though I suppose Eliza told you that already." "She did." More silence. Eliza shifted her weight, clearly struggling with what to say. Ronan squeezed her hand gently. "We should get going," Eliza said finally. "It's a long ride to the ranch." The ride was excruciating. Thomas sat in the back of the wagon, staring at the landscape with the wide eyes of someone who'd never seen anything beyond city streets. Eliza sat rigid beside Ronan, not speaking. Ronan kept his attention on the road, giving them both space to process whatever was happening between them. When they reached the ranch, Thomas climbed down and looked around with obvious surprise. "This is not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Eliza asked, her tone sharp. "I don't know, something smaller, more desperate." Thomas caught himself. "I'm sorry, that came out wrong." "Did it?" Eliza brushed past him toward the house. "I'll make coffee." Thomas looked at Ronan helplessly. "I'm making a mess of this already, aren't I?" "Little bit," Ronan said. "But you're here. That counts for something." "Does it? To her?" "I don't know yet. You'll have to ask her yourself." They followed Eliza inside. The house was warm and clean, nothing like the bare bachelor quarters it had been a year ago, Thomas noticed. Ronan could see him taking it all in, the curtains, the books, the small touches that made it a home. "You've done well for yourself," Thomas said to Eliza as she poured coffee. "I've survived," Eliza corrected. "There's a difference." "Eliza, please, I'm trying." "Trying what?" "To make yourself feel better about abandoning me." Thomas flinched like she'd struck him. "I didn't abandon you." "Yes, you did. When I needed you most, you turned your back and let everyone believe the worst about me. I didn't know what to believe, the accusations, the rumors." "So you believed them?" Eliza's voice rose. "You believed I would seduce a married man? Your own sister?" "No, I mean, I didn't want to believe it, but everyone was so certain." "I told you the truth. I told you he propositioned me and I refused. I told you he lied to protect himself. And you still chose his word over mine." Thomas set down his cup, his hands shaking. "I know, and I've regretted it every day since. Regret doesn't fix what you did." "I know that too." They stared at each other across the table. Ronan stood by the stove, staying out of it but ready to intervene if things got worse. This was between them. Had to be.
"Why are you really here?" Eliza asked, her voice tired now instead of angry. "You didn't come all this way just to apologize." Thomas looked down at his hands. "Emily left me. My wife. 3 months ago." Eliza's expression shifted. "What happened?" "She met someone else. Someone richer, more successful. She said I was boring, that our life together was suffocating her." Thomas laughed bitterly. "Turns out she'd been having an affair for over a year. Everyone knew except me."
Thomas. And when I found out, when I confronted her, you know what she did? She told everyone I'd been cruel to her, that I'd driven her away with my coldness. And people believed her, just like they believed that man who lied about you. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Thomas wiped at his eyes, not quite crying, but close.
"I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry, Eliza. I didn't understand. I didn't know what it felt like to have your whole life destroyed by someone else's lie. But I do now, and I finally understand what I did to you." Eliza sat down slowly. Her anger had drained away, replaced by something sadder. "You couldn't have known. Not really. Until you lived it. That's no excuse." "No, it's not." Eliza reached across the table, took his hand. "But I forgive you anyway."
Thomas broke then, really crying. "I don't deserve it. Probably not. But I'm giving it to you anyway because holding on to it was killing me." She squeezed his hand. "We've both been through enough, Thomas. Maybe it's time we stopped punishing each other." Ronan watched them, feeling something tight in his chest loosen. This was what healing looked like. Messy and painful and imperfect, but real. Thomas stayed for a week. At first it was awkward, 3 people trying to navigate old wounds and new dynamics. But slowly, things got easier. Thomas proved himself useful around the ranch, eager to make up for lost time. He wasn't good at manual labor, but he tried. Ronan found himself almost liking the man, especially when he saw how hard Thomas was working to rebuild his relationship with Eliza. One evening, Ronan and Thomas were mending fence while Eliza was in town teaching. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and orange. "She's incredible," Thomas said suddenly. "My sister. The way she's built this life. The school. The respect she's earned here." "Yeah, she is. I don't know if I could have done what she did, started over from nothing." Ronan hammered in a post. "You're doing it now, aren't you?" Thomas considered that. "I suppose I am. Though I don't know where I'm starting over to." That's the thing about starting over. You don't have to know, you just have to take the first step. "Is that what you did when you came here?" "Yeah, I was running from some things, running toward others, didn't have a plan, just knew I needed something different." And now, Ronan looked toward the house, thinking about Eliza. "Now I've got more than I ever thought I'd have. A home, a wife, a life worth fighting for." "You love her?" "More than anything." Thomas nodded slowly. "Good. She deserves that. Deserves someone who sees her worth." "So do you." Thomas smiled sadly. "Maybe someday." When Eliza came home that evening, she found the 2 men on the porch, sharing a bottle of whiskey and actually laughing about something. She stood in the doorway watching them, and when Ronan met her eyes, she mouthed the words, "Thank you." The night before Thomas left, Eliza made a special dinner. They ate together, the 3 of them, and the conversation flowed easier than it had all week. Thomas told stories about their childhood, about their parents, about things Eliza had forgotten or chosen not to remember. She laughed at some, cried at others. "Do you remember when Papa built that bookshelf for Mama?" Thomas asked. "And it collapsed the first time she put books on it?" Eliza giggled. "She was so angry, but he rebuilt it, and the second one lasted 20 years. He always said measure twice, cut once. That's what I tell my students now. His advice lives on." Thomas's smile was bittersweet. "He'd be proud of you, what you've built here." "I think so too." After dinner, Thomas pulled Ronan aside. "Take care of her," he said quietly. "She acts strong, but she's been hurt too many times." "I know, and I will. If you ever need anything, money, help, whatever, you let me know. I owe her that much." "We don't need charity." "It's not charity, it's family." Ronan shook his hand. "Then I'll keep that in mind." The next morning, they drove Thomas back to town. The goodbye was tearful, but hopeful. Eliza hugged her brother for a long time, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling through the tears. "Write to me," Thomas said. "Let me know how you're doing, how the school's going."
I will. And you write back. Tell me about Boston, about your life. It's not much of a life right now.
Then rebuild it. That's what we Kavanaughs do.
Thomas laughed. Whitmore now, isn't it? Hale, actually, but the point stands. On the ride home, Eliza leaned against Ronan's shoulder, quiet and thoughtful. "Thank you," she said after a while. "For what?" "For letting him come. For being kind to him even though he didn't deserve it."
"Everyone deserves a second chance. You taught me that." Eliza kissed his cheek.
"I love you, Ronan Hale." "I love you too."
August brought heat and hard work. The ranch was thriving in ways it never had when Ronan worked alone. The cattle were healthy, the crops growing well, and with James's continued help a few days a week, they were actually getting ahead instead of just surviving. Eliza's school was flourishing too. 23 students now, with parents from neighboring towns sending their children to learn from the teacher who'd come from back east. Eliza had become something of a local celebrity, though she hated the attention. "They act like I'm doing something extraordinary," she complained one evening. "I'm just teaching children to read."
"You're doing something extraordinary," Ronan said. "You're giving them a future they wouldn't have otherwise."
"Maybe. But it feels like just doing what needs to be done. That's what makes it extraordinary." Life settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Wake early, work hard, eat together, sleep. The simplicity of it was beautiful in its own way. Ronan found himself more content than he'd ever been. But in mid-September, things shifted. Eliza had been tired for weeks, more than usual. She blamed it on the school year starting up again, on the extra students, on the heat. But Ronan noticed other things. The way she'd turn green at the smell of coffee in the morning, the way she couldn't seem to get through a day without napping, the way her dresses were getting tight around the middle. He didn't say anything at first, didn't want to hope. But when she came home early from teaching one day, looking pale and shaky, he couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Eliza, are you pregnant?" She stopped dead in the doorway. "What?" "Are you pregnant?" he repeated. "You've been sick, tired. You're not drinking coffee anymore. And I'm not blind. I can see your body changing." Eliza sat down heavily. "I don't know. Maybe. I've been trying not to think about it." "Why not?"
"Because I'm scared."
Her voice was small.
"My mother died in childbirth, Ronan. I've always known that could happen to me too.
And out here, with no doctor, no hospital?" "Hey." Ronan knelt in front of her, took her hands. "We'll figure it out. We'll get you the best care we can. I won't let anything happen to you." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'll fight like hell to keep you safe." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "What if I'm not strong enough?" "You are. You're the strongest person I know." "What if the baby? What if something goes wrong?" "Then we'll face it together, whatever happens." She pulled him close, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world. "I'm terrified. So am I. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being terrified means we understand what's at stake." They sat like that for a long time, holding each other in the fading light. The next week, they rode into Cartwell to see the town's midwife, a woman named Mrs. Fletcher, who'd delivered half the babies in the county. She was old, competent, and blunt. "You're about 3 months along," she said after examining Eliza. "Baby seems healthy. You're not, though. Too thin, not eating enough." "I can't keep food down," Eliza said. "That'll pass. Usually does around 4 months. Until then, try dry bread first thing in the morning. Ginger tea helps some women."
"My mother died having me," Eliza said quietly. "Is that something I should worry about?"
Mrs. Fletcher's expression softened. "It's always a risk. Won't lie to you about that. But you're young, you're strong, and you've got a husband who clearly cares about keeping you alive. Those things matter." "What should we do? To prepare?" "Eat. Rest. Don't work yourself to death. And when your time comes, send for me immediately. I've delivered over 300 babies. Lost fewer than I'd like, but not as many as some. I'll do everything I can." It wasn't the reassurance Eliza wanted, but it was honest. Ronan respected that. On the ride home, Eliza was quiet. Ronan didn't push, just let her process. Finally, she spoke. I want to keep teaching, as long as I can. All right. You're not going to argue. Why would I? It's your decision. Most men would want their pregnant wife to stay home. Rest. I'm not most men, and you're not most women. Ronan glanced at her. Besides, you'll go crazy if you're stuck at the ranch with nothing to do. I know you. Eliza smiled for the first time that day. You do, don't you? I'm learning. She taught through October, though she had to modify things as her belly grew. The children noticed, of course. One of the younger girls asked if Mrs. Hale had swallowed a watermelon. Eliza laughed until she cried. By November, she had to stop. She was too tired, too uncomfortable, and the risk of something happening while she was away from the ranch was too high. Sarah Brennan agreed to take over teaching until after the baby was born, though Eliza spent hours preparing lesson plans and materials to make the transition easier. You don't have to do all this, Sarah said. I can manage. I know, but I want them to keep learning, keep growing. They will. You've given them an incredible foundation. Eliza hugged her, feeling emotional in the way she seemed to feel about everything these days. Thank you. For everything. Winter came early that year, the first snow falling in mid-November. Ronan and James worked overtime to make sure everything was ready. Wood stocked, food stored, the barn reinforced. Ronan was taking no chances, not with Eliza pregnant, not with so much at stake. The waiting was the hardest part. December dragged on, each day feeling longer than the last. Eliza grew restless, uncomfortable, her patience worn thin by the confinement and the constant worry. I feel like a prisoner, she complained one evening, trapped in my own body. Only a few more weeks, Ronan said. You keep saying that. Because it's true. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't do this? Ronan pulled her close, or as close as her belly would allow. You can, and you will, because you're Eliza Hale, and you don't give up on anything. She wanted to believe him. Some days she did. Other days, the fear was too much. On Christmas Eve, Eliza woke Ronan in the middle of the night. Something's wrong, she said, her voice tight with pain. Ronan was up immediately. What kind of wrong? I don't know. Cramping. Sharp. It's too early, Ronan. The baby's not due for another month. Fear slammed into him. I'm going for Mrs. Fletcher. You can't. The snow. I don't care about the snow. Stay here. Don't move. He rode through a blizzard to get to town, pushing his horse harder than he should have, his hip screaming in protest. Mrs. Fletcher took one look at his face and grabbed her bag without asking questions. By the time they got back to the ranch, Eliza was in active labor. Early, yes, but happening whether they were ready or not. Get water boiling, Mrs. Fletcher ordered Ronan. Clean linens, then get out. This isn't something you need to see. I'm not leaving her. Yes, you are. You'll just be in the way. Eliza grabbed his hand. It's okay. Go. I'll be fine. Ronan kissed her forehead, tasting salt and fear. I love you. I love you too. Now go before I start screaming at you. He went. Spent the next 6 hours pacing the front room, jumping at every sound from the bedroom. Every cry from Eliza made his chest tighten until he thought his heart might give out. It was nearly dawn when he heard it. A thin, reedy wail that didn't sound quite human. Then Mrs. Fletcher's voice, calling his name. Ronan burst into the room. Eliza was propped up against pillows, exhausted and pale, but alive. And in her arms was a tiny red-faced creature wrapped in a blanket. You have a son, Mrs. Fletcher said. Small, but healthy. He's a fighter. Ronan crossed to the bed, his legs shaking. Eliza? I'm okay, she said, her voice hoarse. Look at him, Ronan. Look at our son. Ronan looked. The baby was impossibly small, his face scrunched up, his fists waving, but he was breathing, crying, alive. He's perfect, Ronan whispered. He is, isn't he? Eliza looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. We made a person, Ronan. A whole person. Ronan sat on the edge of the bed, carefully touching one tiny fist. The baby's fingers wrapped around his, and something in Ronan's chest cracked wide open. What should we name him? Eliza asked. Ronan thought for a moment. What about William, after your father? Eliza's breath caught. You'd do that? Yeah, if you want. William Hale. She tested the name. I like it. Mrs. Fletcher cleaned up and gave them instructions. How to feed him, how to keep him warm, what to watch for. Then she left, promising to check back in a few days. Alone with their son, Ronan and Eliza sat together in the quiet, watching William sleep. I was so scared, Eliza whispered. I thought I'd die like my mother did. But you didn't. You survived. We survived. She looked at Ronan. All three of us. Ronan kissed her, gentle and reverent. Yeah, we did. The first weeks with William were harder than anything Eliza had survived so far, and that included leaving Philadelphia in disgrace and learning to live on the frontier. The baby cried constantly, high, piercing wails that seemed to have no pattern or reason. He wouldn't sleep longer than 2 hours at a stretch, and Eliza was so exhausted she started hallucinating shadows in the corners of rooms. Ronan did what he could. He walked William at night when Eliza was too depleted to move, pacing the cold floor in his bare feet, murmuring nonsense words until the baby quieted. He took over all the household work, all the ranch work, pushing himself until his hip throbbed and his hands shook from fatigue. But it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. One night in early January, Ronan found Eliza sitting on the floor of the bedroom, crying, while William screamed in his cradle. I can't do this, she sobbed. I can't. He won't stop crying, and I don't know what he needs, and I'm so tired I can barely stand. Ronan picked up William, who immediately quieted against his shoulder. He's fed? Changed? Yes, everything. He just cries. Some babies do. Mrs. Fletcher said so. I know what she said, but knowing it doesn't make it easier. Eliza looked up at him, her face ravaged. What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I can't give him what he needs? Ronan sat beside her on the floor, William tucked against his chest. You're not a terrible mother. You're exhausted. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah, a terrible mother wouldn't care. You care so much it's eating you alive. Eliza leaned her head on his shoulder. I thought I'd feel different when he was born. I thought I'd know what to do instinctively, but I don't. I'm just guessing all the time. We're both guessing. That's what parents do. Your parents knew what they were doing. My mother died when I was 12. My father drank himself to death 2 years later. I don't think they knew anything. Eliza went quiet. Ronan rarely talked about his parents. She'd known they were gone, but not the details. I'm sorry, she said softly. Don't be. I'm just saying, nobody knows what they're doing. We all just try not to break our kids too badly. Despite everything, Eliza laughed. That's a low bar. Sometimes low bars are all we've got. They sat there together on the cold floor, William finally asleep between them, and Eliza thought that maybe this was what love really looked like. Not grand gestures or perfect moments, but sitting in the wreckage of your exhaustion with someone who refused to leave. By February, things got marginally easier. William's crying settled into something resembling a pattern, and Eliza learned to sleep when he slept instead of trying to maintain a normal schedule. Ronan hired James full-time to handle the ranch work, which freed him up to help more with the baby. The town rallied too. Women Eliza barely knew started showing up with casseroles and bread, with advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Mrs. Pritchard, of all people, brought a beautiful knitted blanket and actually smiled when she handed it over. My daughter lives back east, she said. She has 3 children. I know how hard those first months are. Eliza was so surprised she almost dropped the blanket. Thank you, this is beautiful. You're doing well, Mrs. Hale. The school, the baby, this life you've built. You should be proud. After Mrs. Pritchard left, Eliza stood in the doorway holding the blanket, feeling something shift inside her. She'd spent so long expecting judgment, expecting people to see her as the ruined woman from back east. But most people here didn't care about her past. They cared about what she was doing now, who she was becoming. In March, Eliza started teaching again, just 2 days a week. Sarah continued handling the rest, and together they'd grown the school to 30 students. Eliza brought William with her, setting up a small cradle in the corner of the classroom. The children loved him, taking turns rocking the cradle or making faces to get him to smile. He's like our class mascot, one of the older boys joked. He's a baby, not a mascot, Eliza corrected, but she was smiling. Teaching with William there was chaotic and imperfect, but it worked. The students learned that sometimes Mrs. Hale had to pause mid-lesson to feed her son, and that was okay. They learned that life didn't stop for education. Education happened alongside life. Ronan would pick them up in the evenings, and Eliza would climb into the wagon exhausted but glowing. Margaret read an entire chapter by herself today, and Tommy's arithmetic is better than mine now. That's because you're terrible at arithmetic, Ronan teased. I am not. I'm just creatively challenged in that area. That's what terrible means. She swatted his arm, laughing, and William gurgled from his basket like he was laughing too. Spring brought new challenges. The ranch needed expansion if they were going to support a growing family, but that meant more work, more money, more risk. Ronan spent weeks drawing up plans, calculating costs, trying to figure out if they could afford to buy the adjacent land that had just gone up for sale. It's a lot of money, he told Eliza one night, spreading the papers across the kitchen table. More than we've got saved. We'd have to take a loan. How much land? 200 acres, good grazing, access to the creek. It'd double our operation. Eliza studied the numbers. What does your gut tell you? That it's a good opportunity, but also that I'm scared to overextend. What if we did it together? Not just you taking the risk, but both of us. Ronan looked at her. You'd be willing to do that? This is our ranch now. Our family, our future. If you think it's worth the risk, I trust you. The loan came through in April. By May, they owned 500 acres and had hired 2 more hands to help manage the expanded herd. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. And some nights Ronan couldn't sleep for worrying about whether they'd made the right choice. But Eliza never wavered. She kept teaching, kept managing the household finances with the same sharp mind she brought to everything else, kept believing they could make it work. And slowly, impossibly, they did. Summer brought William's first birthday. They celebrated with a small gathering, James and a few of the ranch hands, the Davisons, Sarah Brennan and her family, even Mrs. Pritchard. Eliza made a cake that was lopsided and overly sweet, and William smashed his face into it with such enthusiasm everyone laughed until they cried. He's got your appetite, Ronan said, wiping frosting off William's nose. And your stubbornness, Eliza countered. Look at him. He's not stopping until every crumb is gone. Thomas sent a package from Boston. A wooden rocking horse he'd carved himself, smooth and beautiful. The note inside said, "For my nephew. May he grow up knowing he's loved, even from far away." Eliza cried reading it. He's trying so hard to be better. He is better, Ronan said. People can change. You proved that. We both did. That night, after everyone had gone and William was asleep, Eliza and Ronan sat on the porch watching the stars. The air smelled like grass and the distant promise of rain. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Eliza asked. If I hadn't gotten on that stagecoach, if you hadn't written to the agency. Sometimes. What do you think? Would you have been happy? Eventually? Ronan considered the question. I don't know, maybe I would have convinced myself I was, but it wouldn't have been this. This? He gestured to the house, the land, everything they'd built. This, you, William, knowing what it feels like to have something worth protecting. Eliza took his hand. I was so broken when I came here. I didn't think I'd ever feel whole again. Are you? Whole. I don't know if anyone's ever truly whole, but I feel like I'm enough. Like I don't have to be perfect to deserve happiness. Ronan kissed her knuckles. You never had to be perfect. You just had to be you. I wish I'd known that sooner. Would have saved a lot of pain. Maybe. But maybe the pain is what taught you. Eliza thought about that. About Philadelphia. About the scandal. About the long journey west and everything that came after. About how the worst thing that ever happened to her had led to the best thing that ever happened to her. You're probably right, she said. Doesn't mean I'd want to do it again, though. Fair enough. In the fall, the school board approached Eliza with a proposal. They wanted to build a larger school, one that could accommodate students from all over the county, and they wanted Eliza to run it, to hire teachers and develop curriculum and shape the education system for the entire region. It's a huge responsibility, the board chairman said, but we can't think of anyone better suited for it. Eliza was honored and terrified. I have a son, a ranch. I can't dedicate every waking hour to this. We're not asking you to. We're asking you to use your expertise to build something that will last beyond your time. To create a legacy. She talked it over with Ronan that night. It would mean more work, more time away from home. Would it make you happy? I think so. But I don't want to neglect William, or you.
Ronan pulled her close. You're not going to neglect anyone. You're going to build something incredible, and we're going to support you. That's what families do.
You're sure? I'm sure. Eliza took the position. Over the next year, she helped design and build a 3-room schoolhouse that could hold 60 students. She hired 2 young teachers fresh from a women's college in the East, both of them bright and passionate. She developed a curriculum that balanced practical skills with classical education, believing children deserved both. The new school opened in September, almost 2 years to the day after William was born. On the first day, Eliza stood in front of the building with Ronan and William, looking at what she'd created. Your mother did this, Ronan said to William, who was toddling around on unsteady legs. She built this whole thing from nothing. We built it, Eliza corrected. None of this would exist without you. I didn't do anything except believe in you. That was everything. The ranch prospered too. The expanded herd thrived, and they were able to pay off the loan 2 years early. Ronan hired another hand and started breeding horses on the side, something he'd always wanted to try. The horses sold well, and soon they had a second income stream that made the future feel more secure. William grew into a curious, stubborn toddler who wanted to be involved in everything. He followed Ronan around the ranch, mimicking his walk, trying to help with tasks he was far too small to accomplish. He sat in on Eliza's lessons at the school, absorbing everything like a sponge. He's going to be smart, Sarah observed one day, just like his mother. And hard-headed like his father, Eliza added. The best combination. Life wasn't perfect. Ronan's hip still ached on cold days, sometimes bad enough that he couldn't hide it. Eliza still had nightmares occasionally about Philadelphia, about the man who'd lied and the life she'd lost. William got sick that winter with a fever that terrified them both until it broke. But they faced everything together. That was the difference. They didn't have to carry their burdens alone anymore. One evening in early spring, 3 years after William's birth, Eliza came home from the school looking thoughtful. What is it? Ronan asked, noticing her expression. One of my students asked me something today. She wanted to know if I was happy. What'd you tell her? I said yes, and then she asked why, and I realized I didn't have a simple answer. Ronan set down the harness he was mending. What's the complicated answer? Eliza sat beside him on the porch steps. I'm happy because I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding from my past or pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm just living, building something real with people I love. That sounds pretty simple to me. Does it? Because it took me almost 30 years to figure out. Most people never do. Eliza leaned against his shoulder. I used to think happiness was something that happened to you, something you found if you were lucky or good enough. But it's not. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice. You build it by choosing people who don't give up on you, and by not giving up on yourself. They sat in silence for a while, watching William play in the yard with a wooden horse Thomas had sent for his birthday. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Do you ever regret it? Ronan asked. Leaving everything behind, coming here? Not for a second. Do you regret writing to that agency? Best decision I ever made. Even though you got me instead of the woman you expected? Ronan turned to face her. Especially because I got you, the real you, not some version of yourself trying to be what you thought I wanted. Eliza kissed him, slow and sweet. I love you, Ronan Hale. I love you too, Eliza Hale. That summer, Eliza found out she was pregnant again. The news hit differently this time. Less fear, more excitement. They knew what to expect now. Knew they could survive it. Another one, Ronan said, his hand on her still flat belly. We're going to need a bigger house. We'll figure it out. We always do. The pregnancy was easier than the first. Eliza kept teaching through her 6th month, then handed things over to her assistant teachers for the final stretch. William was excited about becoming a big brother, though he didn't fully understand what that meant. In February, Eliza gave birth to a daughter. The labor was long but uncomplicated, and when Mrs. Fletcher placed the baby in Eliza's arms, Ronan thought his heart might burst. She's beautiful, he whispered. She looks like you, Eliza said.
Same eyes. Poor kid, Eliza laughed, exhausted but radiant. We need a name. What about Charlotte, after your mother? Eliza's eyes filled with tears. You remembered her name. Of course I did. Charlotte Hale, she tested it. It's perfect. William climbed onto the bed carefully, peering at his new sister with wide eyes. She's so small. You were that small once, Eliza said. Really? Really? Can I hold her? Ronan helped position William, supporting Charlotte's head while his son cradled her awkwardly. Be gentle. I am being gentle. Charlotte opened her eyes, unfocused and dark, and William stared at her with complete fascination. Hi, Charlotte. I'm your brother. I'm going to teach you everything. Ronan and Eliza exchanged a look over their children's heads. This was it. This was the life they'd built from nothing, from scandal and loneliness and desperate hope. We did good, Ronan said quietly. We did, Eliza agreed. The years that followed weren't easy, but they were full. William started school at 6 and proved to be as stubborn about learning as he was about everything else. Charlotte was quieter, more observant, but just as determined in her own way. The ranch continued to grow, the school continued to thrive, and Eliza and Ronan continued to figure out how to be partners in all of it. They fought sometimes, usually about stupid things, how to discipline the children, whether to expand the ranch again, who forgot to close the chicken coop. But they always came back together, always remembered what they'd survived to get here. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ronan took Eliza back to the spot where they'd first arrived at the ranch. It looked different now. The house expanded, the barn rebuilt, everything more established. But the land was the same, the wide sky, the endless grass, the sense of possibility. Do you remember what you said when you first saw this place? Ronan asked. I said it was honest. You still think so? Eliza looked around. At the home they'd built, the children playing in the yard, the life they'd carved out of nothing. Yeah, I do. It's honest because we are. We don't pretend to be perfect. We just try to be real. That's all we can do. It's enough, though, being real, being together. It's more than enough. Ronan pulled her close, and they stood there watching their children, watching the sun set over land they'd earned through sweat and stubbornness and love. Here's what nobody tells you about starting over. They don't tell you how hard it is, how many times you'll want to give up, how many nights you'll lie awake wondering if you made a terrible mistake. They don't tell you that the shame doesn't just disappear because you moved somewhere new, that you carry it with you like extra weight until you learn to set it down. But they also don't tell you about the moments that make it worth it. The first time someone looks at you and sees who you really are instead of who you were. The first time you wake up and realize you're not running anymore, you're building. The first time you understand that broken doesn't mean worthless. It just means you've survived something hard. Eliza had learned all of this the hard way. She'd learned that reputation isn't the same as character, that starting over doesn't erase the past, it just gives you the chance to write a different future. That love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about finding someone who sees your scars and stays anyway. She'd learned that home isn't a place you come from, it's a place you make. With your hands and your heart, and your refusal to give up even when everything seems impossible. And maybe most importantly, she'd learned that the worst thing that ever happened to her, the scandal, the shame, the forced exile, had been the catalyst for the best thing that ever happened to her. Not because the pain was necessary, but because she'd chosen to transform it into something better, into this life, this family, this fierce, imperfect, beautiful existence on the Wyoming frontier. William was 8 now, Charlotte 6. They were growing up knowing nothing but the ranch, the school, the community their parents had helped build. They knew their mother had come from back east, that she'd been a teacher there too. But they didn't know about the scandal, about the lies, about the woman who'd stepped off a stagecoach crying and desperate. Someday Eliza would tell them. Someday when they were old enough to understand that people aren't defined by what happens to them, but by what they choose to do after. That courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being terrified and moving forward anyway. But for now, she was content to let them be children, to let them grow up in a world where their mother was simply their mother, strong and kind and occasionally too strict about bedtime, where their father was the man who taught them to ride and to work and to stand up for what mattered. The school had grown beyond anything Eliza had imagined. They now had 5 teachers and over 100 students,
drawing families from across 3 counties. The curriculum she'd developed was being adopted by other frontier schools, and she received letters regularly from educators asking for her advice. She'd become, without really meaning to, one of the most respected voices in frontier education. The woman who'd been driven out of Philadelphia in disgrace was now shaping how an entire generation learned to read and think and question. The irony wasn't lost on her. "You know what's funny?" she said to Ronan one night. "The man who lied about me probably never thinks about me anymore. Probably doesn't even remember my name. But I built all of this partially because of what he did. In a weird way, his cruelty gave me the push I needed to find something better. Doesn't make what he did okay? No. But it makes it less powerful. He meant to destroy me, and instead he accidentally set me free." Ronan considered that. "I'm glad he lied then. Is that terrible to say?" "Probably. But I know what you mean," Eliza smiled. "If he hadn't, I'd still be in Philadelphia teaching at that school, probably miserable, definitely alone. I never would have met you, never would have had our children, never would have built this life. The universe works in strange ways." "It does, though I prefer to think we worked in strange ways. We took something terrible and made it into something good. That wasn't the universe, that was us." "Fair point." As the children grew, they started asking more questions about their parents' past. "Where did you meet? Why did Mama come from so far away? Why don't we have more family?" Ronan and Eliza answered honestly, within reason. They met through a marriage agency. Mama came west looking for a new start. Their family was small but strong. The questions would get harder as the children got older. Eliza knew that, but she wasn't worried anymore. She'd learned how to tell her story without shame, how to own her past without letting it define her present. One afternoon when William was 12, he came home from school upset. One of the boys said his father said you ran away from back east because you did something bad. Eliza's stomach clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "What did you say?" "I told him he was lying. You didn't do anything bad." "Come here." Eliza sat him down at the kitchen table. "I want to tell you something, and I want you to really listen." William nodded, his expression serious. "When I lived in Philadelphia, a man told a lie about me. A serious lie that hurt my reputation. I didn't do what he said I did, but people believed him anyway because he was powerful, and I wasn't. I lost my job. I lost my friends. I lost almost everything. That's not fair." "No, it's not. But life isn't always fair, William. Sometimes people get hurt for things they didn't do. Sometimes the powerful win even when they're wrong." "So you ran away?" "I started over. There's a difference. Running away is giving up. Starting over is refusing to let someone else's lie define who you are." William thought about that. "Did it work?" "Look around. What do you think?" He looked at the house, at the ranch visible through the window, at his mother who ran a school and a household and seemed to know everything. "Yeah, it worked. The lesson here isn't that bad things don't happen to good people. They do. The lesson is that you get to choose what you do after. You can let it break you, or you can let it make you stronger." "Which did you choose?" Eliza smiled. "Both, honestly. It broke me for a while, but then I chose to be stronger, and your father helped. Because he loved you even though people lied about you? Because he saw who I really was instead of who people said I was. That's what love is, William. Seeing someone clearly and choosing them anyway." That night, Ronan found Eliza on the porch, staring at the stars. "William told me about the conversation," he said, sitting beside her. "I knew it would come up eventually. You handled it well." "Did I?" "I still don't know if I told him too much or not enough." "You told him the truth. That's what matters." Eliza leaned against him. "I don't want our children to grow up ashamed of where they come from, of who I was." "They won't, because you're not ashamed anymore, and that's what they'll learn from." "I hope so." Charlotte was easier in some ways. She was gentler, less likely to confront conflict directly, but she was also deeply intuitive, picking up on things unsaid. When she was 10, she asked Eliza why she sometimes looked sad when she talked about Philadelphia. "Because I lost some things there that mattered to me," Eliza said honestly. "Not just my job, but friends I thought I could trust, a version of myself I'd worked hard to build." "But you built a new version." "I did. Is the new version better?" Eliza thought about that. It's more honest. I spent a lot of time in Philadelphia trying to be what other people expected. Here, I just try to be myself. I think yourself is pretty good.
Eliza hugged her daughter tight. Thank you, sweetheart. So do I, most days. The ranch continued to thrive. By the time William was 15 and Charlotte 13, they were running one of the most successful operations in the region. Ronan had trained both children in every aspect of the work, and they were capable hands who could manage most tasks without supervision. We should take a trip, Ronan said one evening, just the two of us. James can manage the ranch for a week, and Sarah can handle the school. A trip where? I don't know, somewhere you've always wanted to see. Eliza thought about it. There were places she'd read about, dreamed about. But the truth was, she didn't want to go anywhere. She wanted to stay right here, in this life they'd built. How about we just go to the cabin by the creek, she suggested. Spend a week there. Just us. Ronan smiled. That sounds perfect. They spent a week in the small hunting cabin Ronan had built years ago, far enough from the ranch to feel like a different world. They fished, talked, made love like newlyweds, and remembered what it felt like to just be Ronan and Eliza, not parents or ranchers or community pillars. I needed this, Eliza said on the last night, lying in Ronan's arms, to remember who we are underneath all the responsibility. We're still us, just older and more tired. And happier? Yeah, definitely happier. The years kept passing. William fell in love with a girl from town, a rancher's daughter named Anna, who was as stubborn as he was. Charlotte discovered a passion for medicine and started apprenticing with the county doctor. The ranch expanded again. The school added 2 more classrooms. And through it all, Ronan and Eliza kept choosing each other, kept building this life one day at a time. When Ronan turned 50, his hip finally gave out completely. The doctor said he needed to stop doing heavy labor or risk permanent damage. It was devastating news for a man who'd defined himself by his ability to work. I don't know how to just watch, he admitted to Eliza. How to let other people do what I should be doing. You're not letting other people do what you should be doing. You're teaching them to do what needs to be done. There's a difference. It doesn't feel like enough. That's because you've spent your whole life measuring your worth by how hard you work. But your worth isn't in your labor, Ronan. It's in who you are, the father you've been, the husband, the man who taught 2 children how to be strong and kind and honest. I don't feel like I taught them much. Then you weren't paying attention. Ronan adjusted to his new limitations slowly, with a lot of frustration and a few outbursts that Eliza weathered with patience. But eventually, he found a new rhythm. He couldn't work cattle anymore, but he could train horses. He couldn't build fences, but he could manage the books and plan for the future. And he could spend more time with his grandchildren when they started arriving. William and Anna had 3 in quick succession, and Charlotte married a young doctor from back east who'd come west looking for adventure. They had twin girls who Ronan spoiled shamelessly. You're going soft, Eliza teased him one afternoon, watching him play with the twins. I earned it. You did. On their 25th anniversary, the whole town threw them a celebration. It was embarrassing and wonderful, seeing how many lives they'd touched over the years. Former students, now grown with children of their own. Ranch hands Ronan had trained who'd gone on to start their own operations. Teachers Eliza had mentored who were shaping education across the territory. Look what you built, Ronan said, surveying the crowd. We built, Eliza corrected. None of this happens without both of us. True. But you were the catalyst. You came here broken and scared, and you transformed everything you touched. I came here broken and scared, and you gave me the space to heal. That was the real transformation. They danced that night, slow and careful, because of Ronan's hip, but no less meaningful. The fiddles played, and people laughed, and children ran underfoot, and Eliza thought about the woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach 25 years ago, crying and desperate, and convinced her life was over. If she could go back and tell that woman what was waiting, the ranch, the children, the grandchildren, the school, the love, the life, she wouldn't believe it, couldn't conceive that so much good could come from so much pain. But that's the thing about transformation. It's not linear, it's not clean, it's messy and painful, and requires you to let go of who you thought you were supposed to be in order to become who you're meant to be. Eliza had learned that the hard way. Had learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you cracks you open wide enough to let something better in. That reputation and character aren't the same thing.
That home isn't where you're from, it's who you're with. She'd learned that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees your imperfections and stays, who works beside you even when things are hard, who believes in the life you're building even when you're not sure you believe in it yourself. And most importantly, she'd learned that you don't need permission to start over. You don't need to be perfect or have all the answers or know exactly where you're going. You just need the courage to take the first step and the stubbornness to keep walking even when the path gets rough. Eliza was 60 now, her hair more gray than brown, her hands marked by years of work. But she was happy, deeply, completely happy in a way that had nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with purpose. She still taught occasionally, though she'd officially retired from running the school. She still helped Ronan with the ranch books, still baked terrible lopsided cakes for grandchildren's birthdays, still sat on the porch in the evenings watching the sun set over land they'd earned together. And sometimes when she was alone, she thought about that man in Philadelphia, the one who'd lied, who'd tried to destroy her. And she felt nothing but pity for him. Because whatever petty satisfaction he'd gotten from ruining her reputation, it was nothing compared to what she'd built in the aftermath. She'd won. Not by proving him wrong or by revenge or by forcing him to acknowledge the truth. She'd won by refusing to let his lie be the end of her story, by writing new chapters he could never touch. That was the real victory. Not in vindication, but in transformation. Ronan died first at 72. His hip had never fully recovered, and an infection finally took him on a cold November morning. He went peacefully, holding Eliza's hand. Their children and grandchildren gathered around.
"I love you," he whispered near the end. "Best thing I ever did was write that letter." "Best thing I ever did was answer it," Eliza whispered back. And then he was gone. Eliza grieved hard and honestly. She didn't try to hide her pain or pretend to be strong. She cried when she needed to, laughed when memories struck her, and slowly, carefully, learned how to live in a world without the man who'd seen her at her worst and chosen her anyway. She lived another 8 years, long enough to see great-grandchildren born, long enough to watch Charlotte become one of the territory's most respected doctors, long enough to see William take over the ranch completely and expand it even further, long enough to finish the story she'd started telling herself 25 years ago when she stepped off that stagecoach, that she was worth more than what had been taken from her, that she deserved happiness and partnership and a life built on truth instead of lies. On her last evening, surrounded by family, Eliza looked around at everything she'd built and felt complete. This was the legacy. Not the school or the ranch or even the children, though all of those mattered. The real legacy was the proof that you could survive the worst thing that ever happened to you and still build something beautiful on the other side. That broken didn't mean worthless. That shame could be transformed into strength. That the end of one story could be the beginning of something better. She closed her eyes that night and didn't wake up, peaceful, content, loved. And if there's any justice in this world, the first thing she saw when she opened her eyes again was Ronan, waiting for her with that crooked smile and those work-roughened hands, ready to start the next chapter together. Because some love stories don't end, they just transform into something bigger, something that echoes through generations, teaching people who never met you that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and choosing to build anyway. It's about looking at the wreckage of what you've lost and deciding that what you haven't built yet matters more. That's what Eliza and Ronan taught everyone who knew them. Not through grand speeches or dramatic gestures, but through the quiet, stubborn act of choosing each other every single day, through building a life that mattered, through refusing to let the past define the future. And in the end, that's all any of us can do. Take what we've been given, the good and the bad, the joys and the scars, and transform it into something worth leaving behind. That's the real story, not the scandal or the shame or even the triumph, but the daily choice to keep going, to keep building, to keep loving even when it's hard, to keep believing that tomorrow can be better than yesterday, as long as you're brave enough to make it so.